Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. All right, welcome back to Gun Talk. I'm Tom Gresham. You can join us. All you got to do is give me a call, 866-TALK-GUN or Tom Talk Gun. Now, you know, we talk about guns all the time and shooting and all the different things, and I love that. But I also love reading about guns and reading really good shoot 'em up stories. And the guy who is kind of at the pinnacle of that these days joins us right now, Jack Carr, author of a brand new book, Jack, called Only the Dead.
Yeah, that's it. And thank you so much for having me on. I always love talking with you. I always love talking about firearms and the outdoors and the writing process, all of it.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, yeah, we'll talk about the book in a second, but I want to know, what have you been shooting? What have you been doing for fun?
Well, mostly I missed the greatest winter in Utah history, if you're a skier, because that was the only time that my wife and kids were out of the house on the slopes skiing, which meant it was quiet here.
Oh,
and I could write. And
right time.
This book ended up being the longest. I didn't start out with that as the intent, but it ended up being the longest of all the novels to date, 139,000 words. Also the most brutal, but that took a little longer than I expected. But so I've been doing a lot of working lately, and for fun-wise, it really comes down to writing and juggling the kids.
So, all right. So Only the Dead, it's a James Reese novel. That's the protagonist, your hero in these stories. Mm-hmm. He is kind of similar to you, a former SEAL kind of a thing, but then he takes that thing and goes like all on steroids with it.
That's right. He's similar to me in that we share the same background. I was a prior enlisted SEAL sniper, so is he. He becomes an officer at some point along the way, as did I. And when readers meet him in that first novel, in the novel he's a troop commander. In the show, he's a platoon commander. And then things take a turn, and that's where things shift dramatically from sharing a background with me to becoming a completely fictional narrative. But what I do is take the feelings and emotions behind certain events I was involved with in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I apply those to a completely fictional narrative. So if my character is ambushed on the streets of Los Angeles, California, I go back to thinking what it was like to be ambushed in Baghdad, Iraq in 2006, and I apply those feelings and emotions to the narrative. So for a reader, if it feels like it's a real emotion, that's because it's coming from a real place and it comes right from my heart and soul directly onto the page.
One of the things you do is you really tap into kind of what's going on in geopolitics. I'm looking at, oh my gosh, this review that just came out in Town Hall. Says,
yeah.
They called it prosaic gold, which is fabulous. I love that. So when you tap into that, when you start writing your novel and you get into the middle of it and it's like you're trying to wrap all these pieces together, what is that like for you to pull from real world events and try to put them into this fictional account?
Well, it's very natural to do because I classify these as political thrillers, and politics is dealing, of course, with current events of the day, both domestically and internationally. The specific nature of these novels, where I incorporate conspiracy and thriller action, I get there's a lot to work with these days, both on the international front and the domestic front, from elected representatives, from military leaders, from foreign dictators, foreign intelligence agencies, our own intelligence agencies. So I have a lot to work with these days as a writer of these types of thrillers. So for me, it's very natural to write these in. Oftentimes, I don't know what I'm going to write in because it'll evolve over the course of the novel. Like Only the Dead, that one started out as me wanting to look at the United States through the eyes of the enemy, who's had 20 years to watch us on the field of battle in Iraq and Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And I asked that question, what would they have taken and pulled into their future battle plans? And as I'm writing that, COVID kicks off. So I'm looking at the United States through the eyes of the enemy, and certainly they're looking at our response to COVID and how they can use that in their future battle plan. So I incorporate that. Then a summer of civil unrest. Certainly they're watching how we deal with that, a very contentious political season. So it just made sense to incorporate all that into the novel as I was writing. And I find that does happen as I'm going along, in this case, particularly with Ukraine and what's happening with the Russians in Ukraine right now, and maybe some moves they took in anticipation of some of these events, going back into the pages of history and looking at precedent and anticipating moves by the United States and NATO. And I incorporate that into this novel as well.
You are a student of history. I noticed that in some of the other things that you write, where you're paying attention to what went before, whether they are special forces actions or World War II actions or geopolitical things from 2050, even 100 years ago. How does that inform what you're talking about today?
Well, it's part of the foundation. And I've been a student of history for as long as I can remember, just like I've been a student of the thriller genre. Mm-hmm. And from the history perspective, I always looked at that as something that was going to make me a better leader, a better operator in my future years in the SEAL teams, even from a young age. So history forms the foundation for so much of what we do in life in general. It can be personal history, where you're taking successes and failures and those lessons and applying them to future decisions or current decisions, hopefully in the form of wisdom. But at the geopolitical level, it's not really that different. Sometimes we neglect those lessons, and that's oftentimes come down to what I call imperial hubris, and I weave that into the novels as well.
I'm reminded of the phrase that says, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
We all have a little bit of that, the scars from that somewhere along the way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's bound to be a little of that going on. You want to minimize, that as much as you can, though.
Well, and then one of the things I tell people, I said, look, you can't learn all this on your own. You don't want to have all those scars. That's why, spinning it up to a lot of what we talk about is you go get training, whether it's SIG Academy or Gunsight or Thunder Ranch or someplace, and you go to these places and you go talk to people who people say, well, I never thought of that. I said, yes, that's why you go to people who think about that stuff all the time, right?
That's right. Go to the experts. I'm a big fan of seeking out the best in any particular field, seeking them out and learning, becoming a sponge. It was like that with the scripts for the Terminalist TV show. I had no experience screenwriting, but I was brought in right at the beginning. And so it's been wonderful that Antoine Fuqua, Chris Pratt, the showrunner, David DiGilio, wanted me as a part of this from the very beginning. So what I did was learn. I advised, of course, in my role as an executive producer on all the scripts, but at the same time, I am learning. I am a sponge. And now with this spin-off series that we're writing, I'm writing the final episode. I'm advising on all the other scripts as well, but that's because I was brought into the fold and I learned.
Well, now, Jack, we had the Terminal List series, and I understand there's going to be a Terminal List 2 and then maybe even a prequel. What do we have
That's
here?
Right. That's right. Starting off with a prequel origin story series. So for a fan favorite character from the TV show that I thought was developed much more fully in the show than was developed in the book, and that's Ben Edwards, played by Taylor Kitsch. And we're going back and doing a prequel origin story, how he went from the SEAL teams to the CIA. And this is much more of a international espionage thriller than a revenge thriller, action thriller, conspiracy thriller like the Terminal List was. So it's been so much fun to write, and I could not be more excited for this show to come out. It is awesome. Then we'll roll right from that into the second novel, True Believer, and that one stars Chris Pratt, and we'll get that going right on the heels of this spinoff.
Now, you were featured as an actor in one episode. Are we going to see you again?
Oh, we shall see. We shall see. You kind of got to let those things come to you. You can't be too forward about asking for things like that. But it was so fun to be an assassin.
You're a bad guy, man.
I was a bad guy. I told Chris that things would end up differently if it was in real life. So I had to make sure I laid that groundwork early on. But for anyone listening, it's the early part of episode 3. But then I got to see how they put bullet holes in glass in TV shows or in movies, on film. And what they do is they take these metal straws, these small little cylinders, and they hide them under the dash, right up against the dash, out of line of sight from the camera. And then as someone's shooting in through a window, there's somebody off to the side who's hitting this button and sending a small ball bearing. It's like a little mortar. And it shoots up from being hidden right there against the dash into the windshield from the other direction.
Wow.
So it looks like the bullet's going in one way, but really it's a ball bearing hitting the glass, making it look like splintering like a bullet hole.
Right.
And so I wore glasses so that the glass wouldn't get my eyes, that sort of thing. And then they put squib in the headrest, and Chris finishes me off with a shot to the head, and I throw my head to the side, the squib goes off and splatters the whole car with blood. It was pretty fascinating. It was a fun time.
All right, so Jack Carr, the new novel, Owner of the Dead, comes out on May 16th, Tuesday the 16th.
That's it.
Available everywhere, Amazon, anywhere you want to get books, Kindle, and everything else. Look, anytime you want to, you're welcome back here because we'll talk guns, shooting. Doesn't matter. We're having fun. There you go.
Love it. I love it. No, thank you so much for all you do.
Congrats on the book, man.
Thank you.
All right,
appreciate
take care.
That.
All righty.